So thank you for joining us, everybody, for this edition of IT Connections. This is Martello's weekly series that keeps you connected to the top IT tools and trends. My name is Sarah Purdon, and I'm from Martello, and I am going to be your host for today's talk. So our topic for discussion today is building a collaboration-focused remote work infrastructure. And obviously, recently we have seen companies across the globe really scramble and quickly try to adapt to try and handle this influx of remote work that's been brought on specifically by COVID-19. And nobody knows that more than my two guests who are here on the line with us today. So I would like to welcome Martello's own John Salem, who is our Director of Q&A at Martello, keeps everything running smoothly here, and also Jay Payette, who is the virtual CIO at Payette Consulting. So welcome, gentlemen. We're going to roll through some questions here today. So I know that your team worked really tirelessly, which is an understatement, to make sure that the employees at Martello were able to quickly ramp up to remote work. And John, you guys made it look really easy, but I'm sure that there was a lot of sweat and maybe even some tears behind the scenes to make this happen in what really was a matter of days. With the shift to remote work, working from home has its challenges. So what collaboration tools did we sort of ramp up with quickly at Martello to keep employees productive as much as possible during this time?
I think we're lucky at Martello because we are multi-site, so we have time zones, European offices, so we're used to working in remote environments. We tend to use tools, or we do use tools like Slack, Zoom, Teams. They're the common ones, but I know with customers we use all kinds of them. Like this is actually my ninth different collaborative videotape tool that I've used in the last 2 weeks with different
Yeah.
customers. So you have to be flexible, but in general, we've been using and have been using for years the like Zoom and Teams and Slack. So those are the main ones we use as a company to communicate with.
Now, when we were talking the other day, Jay, you were talking about sort of more on the development side of things. Can you kind of elaborate on some of those collaboration tools on the development side that really kind of keep people connected?
Yeah, for sure. John mentioned some of the great collaboration tools that are used across the entire enterprise, but there are specific collaboration tools within the development teams. Specifically, Jira Confluence and GitHub have been
Yeah.
used. But again, these have been deployed before the crisis, and they're just part of the team's regular workflow.
Yeah, absolutely. It's amazing, like once you kind of go to a remote work, right? Like how much you sort of lean on these tools, right? And we're obviously like an Office 365 shop. Can you, maybe John, can you kind of get us started? Like what are some of the advantages to using cloud services such as Office 365 for remote workers?
So, regardless of the current COVID crisis, the advantages of cloud services are the security aspects that you have people that are really know what they're doing, protecting a lot of the cloud platforms. Your OpEx versus CapEx. There's lots of real reasons to go cloud versus on-prem. But the interesting one for us is that we actually found our network behaving better because now that everybody dispersed, they go directly from their own network connection to the cloud, and we're not all kind of
Like,
congregating down through one pipe that our internet pipe at the office.
yeah,
So in some ways, we have busy hours, and you have to kind of, as an IT group, you make sure those pipes are as big as they need to be, but at times they get busy and people have like on a busy hour like at 10 a.m. in the morning when everybody's on meetings or streaming video stuff, we tend to get some lag time or robotic
yeah.
voices or calls that complaints like that, and we don't get that much anymore. We've had to gear up VPN-ish kind of things in the current increasing licenses, but in general it's actually been a really strong thing for us. If anything, things are probably working slightly better.
I think, Jay, the other day when we're kind of going through these questions, you said that you would cringe at the thought of having to use like legacy productivity software during this sort of time, right? Like, so that cringe factor, right? So maybe you can sort of just like follow up to what John was saying or whatever at the thought of trying to do things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think John encapsulated a lot of the benefits of the Microsoft 365 platform, but this pandemic or crisis has really accelerated a trend in work flexibility that Microsoft has picked up on about a decade ago when they decided to pivot, their software offering to the cloud. So Microsoft's entire 365 platform was really built for a work environment, just like the one that we're all living through right now. And that has led to a rather seamless transition. When you think about desktop software that's only available on the machine and shared network drives and trying to transition that to the home, I do cringe when I think about the work involved with that versus what's been a relatively smooth transition with the Office 365 platform.
Yeah, like from a sort of end user side of things, it has absolutely been a smooth transition for sure. Both of you guys, or gentlemen, when we were speaking the other day, talked about, the steps that you had taken sort of before this shift to remote work that really kind of laid out that foundation for that smooth sort of transition. Jay, what are your sort of thoughts around that? Like, how did the sort of foundation that you laid out before make this an easier transition?
Yeah, I think I'd like to say that we kind of strategically prepared exactly for this scenario, but that would not be entirely true.
But it sounds so good.
It does sound good.
It sounds so good.
Yeah, but it's really Martello's culture and the work environment that led us to build out a computing environment that was very remote friendly. And that was based on the concept of work flexibility. And John mentioned, the internationality of the staff. So there are some unique scenarios within the Martello enterprise. Specifically, there are a lot of developers that like using desktops that run Linux. So we've got users running Windows 10, we've got users running Ubuntu Linux, and there's not a lot of desktop software that can span both those platforms. So that led us to naturally skew towards the SaaS environment.
Yeah.
And one of the knock-on effects of that is that when an event like this happened, we were already in a scenario that we could adapt quickly.
Yeah, no, that's a good point for sure. John, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, and I think the decision for us was a fairly quick one. We went from a meeting on a Sunday night to telling people Monday, and we were all working from home Tuesday. So we didn't have a lot of time to prepare. And as Jay says, we're lucky in some of the decisions we made. But we still had to do some things like increase some VPN licenses because there was going to be a bit more access from home. But in reality, for us, it was pretty quick and seamless because we had people that worked from home in every location. So we knew technically that it worked. And it was just a matter of now making it work for multitudes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, and I think you guys did that, right? And you kind of made it work and it happened and stuff like that. And, I'm sure there was a lot of things that you kind of figured out along the way. So now it's like we're sort of I think we're going into our 12th week of remote work right now. So it's like, what are some of the steps that you're currently taking to make sure that you can kind of continue to offer this, service to remote workers? Like, I'm sure there's lots of, issues like troubleshooting things that kind of come up. Like, so John, what are you guys kind of trying to do right now to continue to offer that good service?
So we've probably had to do a bit more formalizing around our help desk. Tickets are coming in from all over. So we've implemented some tools to help us there. So that way we can kind of manage tickets taken on a first come, first serve or prioritize them appropriately. So that's something. We've also had to purchase some remote control desktop software. We've always been able to use remote capabilities of Slack and or Zoom, but they have sometimes when they don't work as well. So we've actually purchased for our support guys the ability to do some desktop sharing kind of software. So there has been a few things that we've done that we didn't do in the past. And obviously they would have just walked over and fixed somebody's problem on their desktop or laptop in past, but we do need this more remote work stuff. So
yeah, like it kind of, I imagine those sorts of tools would cut that sort of troubleshoot, you know what I mean? Like for them to just kind of take control over somebody's,
it needed to be
laptop or
reliable.
whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Jay, what are your thoughts on that?
I think John touched on what's been an important change is kind of the human element and the expectations. Before, someone in IT support could literally walk across the hall and fix someone's computer. Now they don't have that ability. They have to remote in. Person has to set aside time for the support person to troubleshoot on the machine. And so the way you're working fundamentally isn't changing, but the expectations that the end user have, they have to be tweaked a bit because you don't have that physical presence that you had at one point.
Yeah, for sure. I find as a remote worker, like I find sometimes reliability, so something that worked really well and, exactly how you would expect it to one day, then suddenly the next day, for whatever reason, doesn't. So I have been a customer of your IT help desk and had, them sort of take over my laptop to fix whatever was not working at that time. So yeah, like I said, I think you guys kind of got it to a certain level and are sort of setting up those tools to keep that support going for sure. A lot of people talk about like, sensitive data. And, that's definitely a concern, right? So it's like if we're talking about, hackers, or there's a lot of employees across the globe who have very sensitive data that they have to use or when they're working from home. How do you protect this sensitive data from getting accessed by the wrong individuals or even outside hackers? John, what about you? What are your thoughts on that? Actually, sorry, Jay, let's get started with you because I think you were saying something interesting the other day about that.
Yeah, again, this was a decision that was made far prior to this COVID pandemic, but Martello has always thought of its enterprise as a collection of endpoints. And that again was driven by the decision to enable a culture of flexibility. So that view of a computing environment composed of a bunch of endpoints, as opposed to a bunch of workstations contained within what you might call a walled garden secure network, caused us to change our posture completely, where in a traditional environment, you might focus on protecting that network primarily,
Okay.
and then secondarily protecting the endpoints within them. Our primary focus was to harden the endpoints in addition to hardening our own networks. And that involves deploying various tools, but an important part of ensuring that your endpoints are protected is ensuring that the humans who are using them have the training and the skills to
Yeah.
identify what the risks are and what their role in creating IT risks are. And so that's done with training, it's done with support. And so the key here was don't just focus on the computing hardware, focus on the humans as well.
Yeah. And I think we talked the other day again about sort of security policies, and some of the recommendations that you would have sort of around that. Because again, that sort of setting stone or whatever makes a big difference, right? Can you talk a little bit about those security policies and what some of your recommendations would be to ensure that security?
Yeah,
Jay?
absolutely. I mean, this is a period where 100% of employees are working from home.
Yeah.
And it's a time that really a philosophy in security called ZeroTrust is hitting its stride.
Okay.
And that posture simply means we're assuming that our endpoints and even our network are going to be breached. So if we make that assumption, how do we design policies, tools, networks, and even organizational structures to ensure that there are multiple levels of defense?
Yeah.
We could have someone at home using a secure corporate laptop, let's just say, doing their work, and then they step away, and maybe one of their kids, sees the empty laptop and decides that they're going to go on some websites and download some unknown software or
That
try to download a game.
I can't imagine that ever happening, having teenagers at home. I can't imagine it. But anyways,
Yeah,
go on. I'm
yeah.
painting a
No,
picture
again,
for me.
purely academic scenario, but uh, so how do you control for that? Because obviously kids aren't running around if you're in an office, but at home they are. So what are the things that we have to do to add secondary layers of protection?
Yeah.
And there are tools and architectural decisions we can make, but there are also very simple things we do. Things like enabling multi-factor authentication, identifying logging, and establishing simple norms, such as asking people throughout the organization to share links to files on
Yeah.
SharePoint or OneDrive instead of attachments. So that
Yeah.
way, even if the email itself is compromised, the file isn't compromised. So
Yeah.
getting people to think that way is really part of trying to create that zero trust culture.
Yeah. And I think, John, yeah, go ahead, because I know you had some good points on that the other day.
Yeah, and in generally, this is no different than having 100% mobile workforce.
Yeah.
And really, the idea is that we don't want to have data downloaded on those devices. The idea is you use SharePoints and things like that, and have the data in the cloud and use it there, store it there, and that way, if you know, a phone is lost or compromised, you don't have the data loss. So that's where we're getting into really encouraging usage that way. So it really doesn't matter if it's compromised, because in the end, the data is protected up on those drives.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I know that security is a huge issue, with a remote workforce for sure. Like another thing that I hear quite often is, as a network administrator, sort of who's working from home, what type of remote monitoring product could kind of give you that sort of big view of the network so that you guys know when there may be issues, when a server might be down. I would imagine, like if you're working from home too, that sort of is a bit compounded as well. So how do you guys sort of deal with that right now? Maybe John, you can kind of kick us off.
Yeah, so we are lucky. Our products, not to get into an advertisement here, but our Martello is a remote monitoring product
Yeah,
company. And so we do use our own product in multiple ways. We can monitor our networks, we can have thresholds and alerts, we can have, get sent emails or texts. So that kind of stuff happens naturally with our products. We were doing that before, and then we can consolidate over multiple platforms, different kinds of devices, whether we're monitoring phone systems or servers, and we can consolidate rules through our IQ product, and then with our MPA product, we can monitor those things. So we are lucky in that we have some in-house tools to do some of that stuff.
yeah. Yeah, again, like we're working remotely, but so are you. Some of the things that you had is sort of in the office or whatever are now gone, right? So to have those tools as, at your disposal will definitely sort of help. So if an employee is actually working from home and is having, slowness on the network, which again, I'm very familiar with because I have sometimes some unreliable internet when I'm working remotely. So how would you even sort of start to debug or troubleshoot an issue like that? Like Jay, how have you sort of approached something like this in the past?
I think the key is trying to give your employees or your end users the ability to monitor what the trouble might be. So if you're on kind of a more traditional network, you can monitor a set of network bottlenecks, and then that gives you a pretty good sample size of understanding what everyone's quality of service is. Now you've got all these endpoints out there in space or the cloud, and rather than having to try to support and monitor kind of a sample size, every complete endpoint is its own variable. And so giving the end user the ability to check and monitor what their network capabilities are,
Yeah,
I think is the solution, rather than trying to centrally manage it. And so
yeah,
there's some interesting tools like Martello's UC score that allow users to kind of quickly do a quality of service test on their own home connection. And I think everyone's going to find out quickly how many Netflix shows can be streaming in their house
oh yeah,
before their
I
video.
know. Yeah, I know the answer. I know the answer to how many Netflix shows can stream simultaneously. And
Right.
it's interesting. I use UC Score. I know it's our own product, but if I'm having like sluggish internet, like I do a quick test at, ucscore.com, and I know right away how things are going, right? So that sort of quick troubleshooting tool is really valuable for sure.
And when you're on a conference call, it's like, okay, if
Oh,
I'm seeing one person robot it, it's their network. If everybody is, it's my
It's
network.
true.
I
Yeah.
know it's a quick sort of troubleshooting, very quick troubleshooting for
And our
sure. And
experience, but the experience has held out that 99 times out of 100, the problem is usually with the local network in
yeah,
whoever's house, right, or their
yeah.
internet connection.
Yeah, I think that is typically sort of where we see, yeah, where I'm sure you're sort of seeing the majority of problems for sure. I want to just kind of be mindful of time. So I'm just thinking maybe we can kind of cover off a couple more questions. We talk a lot about VPN, and, what advantages this does offer to remote employees. And I think you guys have sort of talked about sort of the positives and negatives around that. Maybe if you could just expand a little bit on that. John, what advantages does it offer to remote employees?
If VPN, which is a virtual private network, essentially using a tool will create a secure connection back to our network internal. And as Jay talked about, that's the walled garden kind of scenario. We do have some tools that we have, not so much, some of them are cloud. We've moved those to the cloud, but there's other ones that we still have on servers locally. We also have our own test networks. So it's not like you can just migrate those to the cloud easily. Like we've got, a bank of hundreds of phones sitting in a lab in the office, and it's not like you can just go and
No.
connect to that. So VPNs have their purpose, absolutely. The SaaS model has reduced that to a certain degree, but there's still some things that are mission critical that we want to have in our own network, and we want to control that up with the utmost care.
Yeah, Jay, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I agree with all the points he made, and I might just flip the question a bit to focus on the benefit of the organization versus the end user. In that, if we get back to the concept of zero trust, the one thing that VPN allows us to do is to segment our networks. And
Okay.
we can grant access to a network segment that allows users to get in there and access the application in the environment or whatever it is that they need to do their job, but they don't have access to the entire network. And so we can create this ring of network segments that limits the access people have. Again, if there was a breach, it adds another level of security to what might be the most critical or sensitive areas of the network.
Yeah, that's interesting. I had a call recently with a Martello customer who's with the Leiden University Medical Center to discuss how that hospital quickly ramped up to sort of deal with COVID-19 in addition to remote work. And one of the questions that I asked him, Willem Bowman, who is the administrator there, was, how has his job really become tougher? So, obviously you were sort of used to sort of a specific type of job at Martello. And then with COVID-19 and all the employees sort of, quickly going home, has your job become tougher? Is it easier? Like maybe John, maybe you can kind of get started. Is your job tougher right now?
So there certainly was a bump at the beginning when we had to
Yeah.
get everybody settled down at home, whether that was getting them monitors, desktops, stations, chairs that are appropriate. So everybody needed to get set up at home. So once that happened,
Yeah.
it settled in quite nicely, and it has been not better, but certainly just a little different. It's just recently that we've actually run into one of the more difficult ones is we've now had a bunch of onboarding when it came to co-ops, and that becomes a little more difficult in this environment where you can't just, go deploy a new laptop or desktop at a desk
Yeah.
locally. We've actually had to do some shipping of equipment and things like that to help those students that don't have the right remote environment, and other ones that do. It's just a matter of setting up the right connection. So it's different. I wouldn't say it's better or worse.
Yeah. And Jay, what about you? Like, how would you sort of rate your current job in this post-remote work world right now?
I would agree with John. From
Yeah.
day-to-day IT operations, things haven't changed much. Again, because we already had a posture that allowed remote work. Certainly in the early days, there was a little bit more stress in that if
Yeah.
critical applications failed,
Yeah.
then there would be a massive impact on the business. Luckily, fortunately, that hasn't happened. And I think one of the keys is, and John had touched on it, because things have run relatively smoothly, and because Martello had already built out a very flexible computing environment, leadership and management have been freed up to deal with anomalies that pop up, such as, oh yeah, how are we going to get new laptops to these co-op students or new hires, and they can focus on that versus just trying to keep the enterprise functioning or keeping the lights on. So
Yeah.
I can't say it's been any harder or more stressful, and it hasn't really impacted how we look at investing in technology to improve operations or to improve our customers' experiences. So knock on wood, we've been quite fortunate.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, like I said, you guys have made this look a very easy transition for sure. And like I said, I'm sure behind the scenes, it was a huge amount of work. So I just want to say, John and Jay, thank you so much for joining me today for IT Connections. And I just want to also thank everybody who took the time to listen. Look forward to seeing you the next time. Take care, gentlemen. Have a great day.
Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.